Good morning all. Thank you very much for joining the Data Security and Compliance webinar. We're now ready to get started. I think everyone has signed up now. My name is Jim Marshall-Andrew. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at Nomis Connections. With me I have Matthew Cox, who's Marketing Manager of Nomis, Nick Harvey, who's Product Manager, Cyber Security from Daisy, and Alan Stevenson-Brown, who's Director at Phoenix Managed Networks, both of whom are leading experts in data security and compliance. For those of you who don't know us, Nomis Connections are a telecom specialist whose mission is to help solve customers' telecoms problems, ultimately to make them more efficient and profitable. Before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping. Hopefully all of you can now hear us, either through computer audio or through the phone call, through the audio bridge. If you do have a problem, can you please click on the hand icon that is highlighted so we can respond to you. And if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box and we will be fielding them all at the end of the webinar session. So please make sure you keep them coming. We're going to record this webinar and you will be sent out the recording at the end of the session. So no need to take notes. You can just sit back and enjoy the session. I'd like to hand you over to Nick Harvey, who's the Product Manager, Cybersecurity at Daisy. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So during the course of this webinar, we're going to move through these points here. We're going to have a look at the impacts of hacking and the impact on UK businesses of elements like the Data Protection Act and something called PCI DSS, which is the snappy abbreviation for payment card industry data security standards, which affect all businesses that take payments. We're then going to touch on a solution called Sentry, which is a easy way to help you address PCI compliance, which can be quite complicated depending on how you take payments, but also protect the rest of your infrastructure, which is of interest for hackers to get into because it contains all sorts of information about yourself, about your customers, and about your business that they can monetize and sell or use to commit fraud. We'll then work on to the question and answer stage, and there'll be a survey towards the end. So we've seen a lot of breaches currently in the news. You'll notice that they've become more and more frequent, and the news 24-hour news channels talk about them more and more. This probably stemmed from, although they've been going on for an awfully long time since the internet has been around, this probably stemmed from a breach of a large telecommunications company called TalkTalk, which happened last year. That was in the paper an awful lot, and as you can see on your screen here, there's a number of press articles about that. What the TalkTalk breach highlighted was even very large businesses that have layers of security can fall foul of certain attacks and certain ways of being hacked. It really points to the fact that large businesses as well as small businesses are prone to these sort of attacks. You'll see that as well as large businesses, you'll see in the sort of top left, there's small businesses that can also be impacted. Small businesses are probably seen as low-hanging fruit to criminals because, on the whole, their security infrastructures and the processes they have in place tend to be easy to breach, and perhaps sometimes may even be non-existent in some instances. When we go on to payment compliance, there's been a few breaches regularly. There's been a few very large breaches that should really have switched people onto the fact that they need to start to adhere to PCI DSS payment card compliance that we're touching on a little bit. This breach here was a breach from the States, which is for a company called Target, who are a large discount chain in the States. They were hit before the Christmas period, and the cyber criminals accessed their network via a third-party system, which was unfortunately sitting in the same network infrastructure as their payment card infrastructure, something that you shouldn't really do. And we'll touch on segmentation later on, how you split up your network to make it more secure. But in this instance, the criminals were able to access, or fairly simply access, this third-party system and hop along onto the payment infrastructure, plant their malware, and then copy card records out of the network to a cloud server, as well as at the same time as the payment system processing the transaction. So for Target, everything seemed normal. That's a fairly common theme of a single infrastructure, of malware being deployed within the payment infrastructure somewhere, and then it copying records out. So these breaches aren't necessarily aren't obvious to the victim initially. They're not such as malware, where obviously people are making it ransomware, where people are making it obvious they're in your network and they're holding you to ransom. In lots of these breaches, the criminals will sit silently in the network, copying the information that they want and selling it on elsewhere in the internet.
Nick, it's probably also worth just highlighting the fact that the Target breach in the US, at this moment in time, Target is still in court with Visa, MasterCard, arguing about what that fine will be. So it's not just something that happens quickly and moves on. These fines and litigation go on for a long time after the event.
And that's industry related fines as well. So as well as the breach costs that Target are talking to Visa, MasterCard about, there's multiple other areas that you can accrue costs and fines for card breaches. And one of the largest areas potentially being loss of ongoing business. So if your customers know that you're the source of their credit cards being breached, their data being stolen, what is the likelihood of them coming back to you, and what effects that have on your business? So the Target breach was obviously massive in the industry. Lots of people heard about it, and it happened some time ago. So you would think people would start to get their act together and start to focus on security. But as you see here with this next element that I've popped up about Visa, this is with the Visa logo on it. This is for a large company called Oracle, who are a large software managed services company, global company. Their EPOS division, a company called Micros, has recently announced that they've had a breach in their management system, and it's affected a large body of the Micros customers across the globe, and that's dated the 16th of August this year. So very large breaches were happening some time ago. They're still happening now, and it comes down to some sort of general sort of security practices that those businesses need to be following. And the knock-on effects for their customers is they need to ensure that they've got PCI in place, adequate security in place to help protect against breaches such as this, which is where third parties actually are at fault in these instances. Another thing to be aware of, this is a little snippet in relation to the new the data protection rules that are coming in the EU, and this is from the PCI Council. These who are basically saying these new rules, which are more stringent and are quicker to levy fines. So as well as the PCI fines, there's a possibility of falling foul of these new EU regulations that are coming in, and we'll have a quick chat about those on the next slide. So, I mean, in short here, cyber attacks are a constant threat to all UK businesses of all sizes. So there's no such thing as I'm too small, that the criminal won't worry about me. When someone's sitting on the internet scanning for weaknesses, scanning for open firewall ports, they don't know who they're scanning. They're scanning IPs, IP addresses, looking for known vulnerabilities and known applications that have vulnerabilities that they can take advantage of. Security is something that all businesses need to put in place to protect themselves from to the growing risks of cybercrime. And we're talking about there are thousands of attempts to breach companies every day in the UK. So it's a constant threat that people need to be aware of. The statistics from the latest UK government report and of the data set they spoke to, nearly a quarter of those businesses had suffered a data breach of some sort. This is it's a common theme with whether it's a government report, an industry report, a report that a vendor's done, or someone that works within the industry, businesses that work within the security industry. It always tends to be that there's far more businesses being breached than you think they are, and that it's a growing trend. It doesn't seem to be diminishing in any way. So it's something that all businesses need to be thinking about. So not only is it wise to protect your own infrastructure because you're protecting your business, and you're protecting, importantly as well, protecting your customers and their information. There's several sort of areas that you have to adhere to, or that should be pushing you in the direction of implementing decent security. So Section 7 of the current UK Data Protection Act talks about having adequate information technology security in place. The UK Data Protection Act is policed by the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, and they have the ability to fine up to £500,000 if for a particularly severe fine. And what they look at is they look for the protection of personal and private information, really, so names, addresses, phone numbers, contact details, the sort of stuff that can be used in fraud in relation to your customers and your business, and that's really it's really valuable information for them to get hold of and to sell on. So it's information that almost all businesses probably hold about themselves, their staff, and their customers as well. So the UK Data Protection Act touches all businesses in the UK. You've then got industry compliance, such as payment card industry data security standards, which are a set of requirements that all businesses have to adhere to if they take payments. So it's not optional; it's something you have to do, and it's something that the card industry and what's known as the PCI Council, so Visa cards, Visa, Mastercard, American Express, and the like. It's something they've been pushing people towards for quite a period of time. And then on the last point here, the EU General Data Protection Regulations that will be coming into force in early 2018. That is really an enhancement of the Data Protection Act. It could probably be seen as sort of health and safety for data protection, and there's more stringent requirements placed on the businesses, on UK and European businesses. Also, the fining structure is much more considerable, and also there's elements in there such as you having to make announcements that you've been breached. So you would, if you suffer a breach, you would contact the Information and Commissioner's Office, and they would then make a call on whether they announce it to the press or not, depending on the severity of the breach and if it causes harm to the people involved in it and that sort of thing. So in most instances, I would imagine that breaches are announced to the press, which is something that doesn't happen all the time here at the moment because it's not a requirement. The other point here is that, yes, we've Brexited, but the regulations will come into play before we leave the EU, so we probably have a year's overlap where our companies need to be adhering to this. So, Alan, I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about PCI.
Yeah, just some high-level background from a PCI perspective. Our standards were launched back in 2004, and the attempt around this was really to try and stop the amount of card data being stolen, the amount of card fraud, because the amount of card fraud was on the increase. And all businesses that accept credit or debit cards have to be compliant with the standard. The standards and the regulations actually relate to each individual single endpoint, so each individual merchant's location. So it's not on a global basis. You have to adhere on a single merchant basis, and only the merchant can actually sign off that responsibility to say they're actually compliant. So every single merchant has to complete what's known as a self-assessment questionnaire. That questionnaire details some fairly stringent requirements depending how you accept cards on some of the things that a merchant has to complete. So that could be anything from segregating your card payment network, making sure your passwords are rolled, making sure you've got adequate firewall rules in place. There's a number of things from whether it be a bank-provided terminal or a centralized DPOS system. They all have to adhere to these standards. So there's no get out here for any merchant. Every single merchant that accepts cards has to comply to these standards. And from an SMB perspective, it's something that's been pushed quite heavily now from a Visa, MasterCard down to the banks and down to the merchants to make sure all merchants are now compliant, because there's literally tens of thousands of merchants at this moment in time that are still not in a compliant state or struggling to get to a compliant state.
Yeah, and I think that probably the last point here is an important one as well, because there's lots of common misconceptions that Alan and I sort of come across when we're talking to businesses. One of the common ones being that they have a compliant payment terminal or they have a compliant EPOS system, as in that hardware is built to a certain PCI standard, and the business is under the impression that using that terminal or using that piece of kit alone will make them compliant, and that's not the case. That equipment is part of a chain that needs to be built, and as soon as that equipment is dropped into the local network of a business, that local network also needs to be PCI compliant, and that's what the Sentry solution can help with. So the Sentry solution, in conjunction with the equipment that you've bought, the handset from the bank or the EPOS equipment, them working together will take care of a large chunk of the PCI requirements. And as we can see here, this is the 12 steps you need to go through. There's a number of subsets underneath each of these. So when you come to do your self-assessment questionnaire each year, it will be these 6 sections, these 12 questions, and then a number of subsets underneath these. And you can see, as you can start, from section 1, it talks about installing and maintaining a firewall to PCI standards, removing default passwords. So we're starting straight away with some fairly technical elements, and it's as we flow through, it's a number of technical elements, it's a number of process elements, and many of these things are built into the Sentry solution and are automated to make the merchant's life easier and take away that part of their PCI obligation. The good thing is with PCIs, it's there to address card compliance, but also it's a good sort of framework to apply to the rest of your business as well. If you look at it through that sort of that lens, it's a good way of securing the rest of your business. So you can take lessons from PCI and apply that to the rest of your network when talking about securing information and securing the systems maintained within. The last point here is also important, is that yes, PCI, your self-assessment questionnaire, is a single event in the year, but PCI is not like an MOT. It's not a one-off. It's something you then need to maintain throughout the year. You need to maintain your compliance. And again, having a system that automates PCI and runs in the background for you makes it much, much easier for you guys, for the merchants and businesses to maintain their PCI on an ongoing basis. So this is what we commonly see when we go and talk to customers, and this is the single LAN infrastructure we spoke about when we mentioned Target earlier. So we've got the internet, we've got a router or a firewall of some sorts, and probably some Wi-Fi these days, and that goes into this single LAN, this single local area network, and we've got a range of applications in there, as well as your payment system and also the back office computer, which has got lots of interesting information on that a criminal would like to get hold of. And of course, the issue here is they're connected to the internet, and the internet has good people, but also there's lots of cyber criminals, and the internet makes it a very easy way for them to access infrastructure, so they're not easily protected. So these criminals will look at your firewall, and if they're in your vicinity, in your location, they'll have a look at your Wi-Fi infrastructure as well to see how secure that is. And what they're looking to do is they're looking to get onto one one of these applications, or some of the applications you're using within your business that are potentially insecure. So the first one that crossed there was CCTV cameras, which of course everyone wants to remotely view these days. And ironically, security cameras, or a number of model security cameras, are not that secure. It's a general issue with sort of the Internet of Things these days. So the more stuff that connects to the Internet, the more holes you're putting in your network for people to get in and access. So although these applications are doing interesting stuff and cool things we all want, they can open up security flaws. So the criminals look to access one of these insecure applications, and they look to get across to the systems they want to access. So they hop onto your payment system or into your back office computer and basically hoover up all the information they can from your back office computer, and then plant malware in there and on your laptop, on your POS system, to copy information. So your back office computer, as you can see on the side here, is also doing a few things that could be deemed to be insecure. So it's opening email, it's accessing the internet, accessing social media, and the problems there, it may not just be social media, it could be a number of websites that you're going to. All these are potential security issues if that back office system or back office computer is also managing sensitive data. So there's an argument there to split those functions out onto different computers, so you have a secure and one for less secure functionality and usage.
Nick, I think it's fair to say on that point as well, probably 75% of businesses we visit, have discussions with, that have CCTV cameras, have open ports on the firewall for anybody to be able to access, and they're not locked down to any specific source address. So if people know the IPs and ports that the CCTV cameras use, it means anybody can access that CCTV DVR, and once they're on the DVR, they can potentially access any system that's within your local area network. Yes,
and once they're on it, as we said earlier on, they will sit there for a period of time skimming information. So these type of hacks, they're not being held to ransom. They will sit there quietly skimming data for weeks, months. I think the latest stat I saw was it was over 100 days. They could. It seems to be the standard that they're in your network, taking information about you and your customers. So lots of businesses out there probably have no idea they've been hacked. Yeah, it's an issue that everyone needs to think about addressing. Alan, do you want to talk about Sentry?
Yep. So Sentry is quite a unique solution in the fact that it addresses around 85% of the requirements in the questionnaire that Nick talked about earlier, those 12 requirements. And Sentry at this moment in time is the world's first PCI DSS Level 1 certified network management and security service that can actually sit on any type of network. So that'd be from DSL to VDSL to Ethernet to 4G. It can sit at the back of existing MPLS networks, existing managed networks, and provide a common solution for any merchant anywhere in the world. And it's specifically designed to protect sensitive data, so not necessarily just payment data, although it's got some specific accreditations and level 1 certifications for payment data. It also has the same capabilities to protect other records. As you saw on the diagram that Nick talked about last time, on the last slide, it actually protects other areas. So it protects personnel data, customer data. So you can build this as a complete security solution for the business. The solution itself is fully automated, fully managed. And again, one of the key points around PCI is continuous compliance and continuous monitoring and security. That's exactly what Sentry does. It monitors 24/7, alerts, protects, blocks any unwanted or traffic that's not actually destined for where it's actually required for.
Super. We've got an example here of a network that that's been built using Sentry. So if we think back to that last diagram where we had our single LAN environment, what we've done here is we've broken the customers or the businesses local area network into two separate networks here. So we've got our payment infrastructure dropped into its own unique and sort of segmented LAN, and the rest of those applications that people want to use but could be potentially dangerous sitting within another LAN. So what this basically means is, if our criminal is trying to access any of these applications that are deemed to be easier for them to get into and use as sort of a staging post into the rest of the network, Sentry would have built this LAN environment to protect, in this instance, the payment information, payment system. So it's built what's called a card data environment, and the Sentry system will enforce a rule set on this environment so it adheres to payment industry, PCI DSS, payment industry standards. And it basically takes the information about the systems you want within it, so the POS system, and in this instance, the back office computer, which, as you notice, now isn't accessing the internet and isn't using email. It's just being used for payment processing. And it will lock the infrastructure down to those devices, so only those devices can connect. And it will also run a rule set to say that those devices can only talk to the back off the payment gateway of the payment provider that company uses. So it locks down traffic flowing in and out. And then also it means that if any of these applications are breached by a criminal, it means it can't get into they can't get into that separate infrastructure, because it is a completely physically separate network.
It's probably just worth pointing out there that template that gets deployed within the cardholder data environment is a wizard that runs, so you don't have to know the bank's or processor's IP addresses or ports. The actual system itself builds those set of rules and those firewall rules specific to each location and pushes those out to every single device.
Yeah, again, making PCI much easier. So it just takes that headache away from the business involved, that they don't need to keep up to date with those sort of elements. Likewise, if there's, we're in the process of moving from PCI 3.1 to 3.2, there were some technical changes to PCI around the encryption standards being used, around two-factor authentication being needed for systems that access the payment LAN, and those updates were automatically taken on and automatically took place on the Sentry system. So again, it's something that the business involved, the customer involved, doesn't need to worry about. So as well as doing payment card compliance, which is obviously very important, the Sentry solution has a number of other features that are applicable to many businesses that process cards, but also that don't process cards. So it provides that firewall, so that regulates what comes in and out of your network. It will provide one of those, and obviously within the PCI environment, we can that firewall configured to PCI rules. But likewise, we can configure that firewall to the rest of your network and the rest of your requirements as well, to lock down your back office infrastructures and those sort of things. It provides Wi-Fi infrastructures, so it can provide 4 Wi-Fi infrastructures and 4 of LAN segments that can all be individually configured for depending on what your company does, the features and the systems that you use. As you said, it's automated, so all of the firmware updates, all of the software updates are done automatically, as well as the PCI updates. So that's again something that our customers don't need to think about. It does content filtering, so that's basically filtering out unwanted, or stopping access to unwanted websites. So there's built lists there's sort of standard lists of sites that people normally don't access from a business environment, but also those can be tailored to suit what our customers want, and that can go down to the team levels or user levels. There's lots of interesting stats and reporting about usage in the networks. You can see exactly what's going on in the network, exactly what all the devices are doing and where they're accessing. So again, that's of use for management purposes. And then if you've got multiple sites, we can together quite easily, simply, and also importantly securely, by popping up site-to-site networks between those satellite sites. Importantly as well, all the devices come with 4G failover. So in the event of your primary connection going down, you'd fall onto a 4G connection just so you can continue to trade. So, Sod's Law would say in a retail environment on a Friday afternoon, your DSL connection will go down, or Saturday morning, your busiest time. So you're not going to be in a situation where you can't trade. It will the device will pop you onto a 4G connection while the primary connection is the issue there is resolved. And also importantly, if any of you have been through a self-assessment questionnaire, you understand it's quite a lengthy process. The Sentry solution is built into many of the bank's self-assessment questionnaire portals where you go to access your questionnaire and answer those questions. So if you're using Sentry and you select that within those portals, it removes lots of the questions that you need to answer. So it makes that process a lot quicker and a lot easier, much less of a headache. So just a few key points to leave you with on my part. So, hopefully you can see that network security should be a high priority for every business owner, protecting their business but also protecting their customers. Importantly, if you suffer a data breach, it can be critical for your business. So it's something you need to avoid, and putting in adequate security means you're a much harder target. If you are processing payments, you must be PCI compliant. There's no I'm half compliant, or part of my network's compliant, or I'm too small, I don't need to be compliant. Everyone that takes payments must be PCI compliant. It's also not really an option just to sit and take the fine, because the issue with sitting and taking the fine, a non-compliance fine that the banks issue if you're unable to complete your SAQ, is that you are still at risk of very large breach fines if you suffer a breach, and these sit in the region of probably a starting fine of around £15,000. Visa initial fine is about 10,000, MasterCard's is around 5,000, and that's just for starters. You then have forensic investigation costs, card replacement costs, and other industry-related costs, and then obviously the loss of ongoing business. What Sentry can help you do in that instance is it can protect you from those industry-related fines because it's a certified solution. The other key point there is, please remember that if you're using an EPOS system or a bank-supplied card machine or a supplied card, that alone will not make you compliant. You need to use something like Sentry. So on our final point, Sentry is a solution that can help you address PCI in a very easy way, and also help you secure the rest of your business network to protect you from the threat of data breach.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Nick. Thank you, Alan. I think we've had a couple of questions that have come in during the session. If you have any that are still outstanding, please put them into the question box and send them through. Whilst you're doing that, I will try and read out a few that we've got. So, Nick and Alan, here we go. Right, so the first question that's come in. What are the enhancements to the Data Protection Act for a terminal which is designed to be used on the go and on stalls? And then actually following on from that, how would you enable a firewall on this? Also, if it's got a separate internet connection, would this be sufficient? So a few questions embedded there.
Okay. So I suppose when you the thing that varies with PCI, so you have the 12 requirements you need to adhere to, but what varies is how you take your payments. So in that instance, it sounds like if it's payments on the go, it's probably using a 4G SIM. You then also have payments that will be taken via a PSTN line, like a phone line, and that will dial up to a connection. We've spoken about internet-connected payments using a physical sort of a DSL line or something, an ADSL line, a broadband line. So each of those types of ways of processing have to adhere to PCI, but have a different types of requirements because the level of security varies between those different methods. So a PSTN line is quite secure because you need to physically hack into that. A broadband is quite insecure because you're putting information in a format that's easily accessible by a criminal. So an internet connect PDQ or payment card device that uses that standalone uses a 4G SIM is fairly similar to a PSTN line. So it has a simpler form of PCI. I think, Alan, if I'm right, there's about 18 questions or so you need to answer, isn't there? I think for that type of self-assessment questionnaire.
It is if terminals on 4G. It's classed as being on a private network. So hence the number of questions reduces.
Alan, on that, I've just got a further question following on from your answer. It's just saying, just to clarify, the terminal has its own internet connection, I'm assuming via its SIM card.
Yes, if a terminal is connected via 4G using a SIM card, then it's a different set of standards from a PCI, so it doesn't follow the same as a DSL or fiber-connected internet. And because 4G is classed as a private network, the number of questions reduces fairly dramatically, and there isn't a requirement to put a separate firewall in on that type of solution.
Yeah. So the example is, with the PSTN line, your self-assessment questions are around 18 or so. As soon as you hop onto a broadband connection, the minimum amount of questions you answer is about 89 for the same, still for a single terminal. So again, for the 4G connection, it's deemed to be more secure than a broadband internet connection. There's less questions to answer.
But it still has to be PCI compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, look, we've had questions come in about firewalls. If you have an up-to-date firewall in place, does that give you any sort of PCI compliance?
Good question.
Okay.
If you have a firewall in place, there's a number. If you have an existing firewall in place, there's a number of aspects here. One, the firewall has to be running the latest firmware and security patches, and that firewall then needs to be managed with the relevant inbound and outbound firewall rules, and that has to be managed on a 24/7 basis. And if somebody makes a change to that firewall, it needs to be logged and recorded as to the reasons why it's been changed. And any sys logs relating to that firewall also need to be kept, because if there was ever an investigation, those sys logs would be referred to by the forensic investigators.
Okay, and that's effectively what Sentry automates.
Correct.
Sentry's automating
all of them 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it on the questions for the moment. So thank you all for sending those through. It's much appreciated. If you do want or have any further questions, please contact Nomis Connections. You'll see on the screen our main number, or contact me directly, jma@nomisconnections.co.uk, and we'll happily help. It says on here we have a new website that will be launched soon, which will have lots of very useful information, including this recording. The recording will be sent out to you automatically, and with that there'll also be a post-webinar survey. If you could complete that, it would be very, very helpful. It will help us tailor the webinars moving forward. So please give us honest feedback, and we'll make sure that we take it on board. Many thanks for your time. It's much appreciated. I hope you found the session useful. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you.